Welcome to ND Love Story, where love stories are told with raw emotions and captivating storytelling. If you enjoy heartfelt and mesmerizing love stories, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to ND Love Story so you won't miss any episode. Nathan Carter isn't the kind of guy who slows down easily. At 27, he's grown accustomed to the fast-paced rhythm of Los Angeles, a city that never stops moving. By day, he works at a fast food joint, not glamorous, but enough to pay the bills. By night, he loses himself in basketball, the one place where everything else fades away. For Nathan, nothing compares to the adrenaline rush of the ball leaving his fingertips. The moment the world shrinks down to just him and the hoop. That's the part of him everyone sees, the confident, maybe slightly cocky guy who's always up for a challenge. But there's another side to him, a part he's kept hidden for too long. A truth he's never dared to reveal around the guys who laugh loudly and slap each other's backs with easy camaraderie. Nathan hadn't planned on going to the party that night, after a grueling shift and an intense pickup game the night before. All he wanted was a hot shower and a solid night's sleep. But Ryan, his best friend, had other ideas. "You need to loosen up a little, Nathan," Ryan had said, clapping him on the back with an excitement that was hard to refuse. "Who knows? Maybe you'll meet someone interesting tonight." The party was already in full swing when they arrived. EDM blasted from the speakers in the living room. Groups of people clustered in the kitchen, beer in hand, while the air buzzed with laughter and the mixed scents of alcohol and cheap cologne. Nathan wasn't the partying type, but he knew how to fake it. He grabbed a beer, navigated through the crowd, nodding at familiar faces, offering polite smiles when necessary. But his mind was elsewhere. Then he saw him. The guy stood alone near the window, nursing a dark bottle, his gaze lost in the night outside, as if the world beyond the glass was far more interesting than the chaos inside. He didn't belong here. He wasn't the type to be swept up in the drunken noise or the shallow conversations. He looked different. Nathan couldn't look away. The dim lighting caught in the strands of his long, tousled brown hair, making his gray eyes seem almost luminous. His frame was slender, almost delicate, yet there was a quiet confidence in the way he stood, like he was waiting for something. Or maybe someone. Nathan didn't understand why he was so drawn to him. But before he could think twice, he was already moving. "You don't exactly look like you're having the time of your life," Nathan said, leaning casually against the wall beside him. The guy turned, a small, amused smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. "So you noticed? Hard not to." Nathan shrugged, offering a grin. "I'm Nathan. Julian," the guy responded, extending a hand. Nathan took it, feeling the warmth of Julian's skin, the softness of his long fingers. And yet, there was a certain steadiness in the way he shook his hand. And in that moment, Nathan knew, this wasn't just another passing encounter. He held Julian's hand just a second longer than necessary, sensing the shift in the air between them. Something had changed, something neither of them had spoken aloud yet. Julian wasn't like everyone else at the party. He didn't pretend to be excited, didn't force himself into conversations, didn't act like he was having fun when he clearly wasn't. He just existed in his own quiet space, unfazed, as if he was simply waiting for the night to pass. And that intrigued Nathan in a way he couldn't explain. A voice suddenly cut through their moment, dragging Nathan back to reality. "Do you two know each other?" Ryan, grinning mischievously, a beer in hand, clapped Nathan on the shoulder. It wasn't until then that Nathan realized he was still holding Julian's hand. He let go quickly, shrugging it off. "We just met." "Well, stop standing around," Ryan laughed. "There's a group of guys in the kitchen talking basketball. You have to meet them." Nathan should have followed. That's what he would have normally done. But instead, his gaze remained fixed on Julian. "I'll catch up with you later," Nathan said, his tone calm but resolute. Ryan raised an eyebrow but didn't push. With another casual slap on Nathan's back, he wandered off into the crowd. Now it was just the two of them again. "You're not the party type," Julian said, his voice carrying an air of certainty. Nathan chuckled, shaking his head. "No, I'm not." "Then why are you still here?" It was a simple question, but Nathan didn't have an easy answer. Part of him wanted to lie, say he was just killing time, that he didn't really care. But the truth was, he didn't want to leave. Not when Julian was still here. He exhaled slowly, a small smirk forming on his lips. "Maybe because of you," Julian didn't respond immediately, but his gaze softened, something flickering behind his gray eyes, something unreadable, something new. And in that moment, Nathan knew. This wasn't just fleeting. This was the start of something. Julian tilted his head slightly, his gaze lingering a second too long. There was something in the way he looked at Nathan, a quiet understanding, a subtle challenge, that sent a thrill through him. A beat passed, too. The air between them tightened, filled with unspoken words. Nathan bit the inside of his cheek, trying to steady his breath. Doesn't this feel a little strange to you? Strange? Julian raised an eyebrow, his lips curving slightly. You mean a guy you just met admitting that you're the reason he's still here? Nathan huffed a quiet laugh. Not exactly. It's just, I'm not used to this feeling. Julian blinked, and for the first time, Nathan caught a flicker of hesitation in his eyes. What feeling? Nathan's gaze flickered across the room before settling back on Julian. The feeling of being understood before I even say anything. The air between them shifted instantly. The teasing disappeared, replaced by something heavier, something real. Julian's breath hitched slightly, and after a moment, he spoke, his voice lower, quieter. You're not the only one who feels that way. Nathan's chest tightened. He hadn't known what response he'd been expecting. But Julian's words hit somewhere deep. He wanted to understand him more, to unravel the mystery behind those gray eyes and the quiet confidence that seemed to set Julian apart from the rest of the room. He inhaled, gripping the unopened beer can in his hand, but his eyes never left Julian. So, he tilted his head, lips curling into a playful smirk. Want to get out of here? Julian hesitated for only a moment before a real smile broke through. I think that's a great idea. Nathan didn't wait a second longer. He turned, weaving through the crowd with Julian right behind him. For the first time in a long time, he didn't care where the night would lead. Outside, the night air was crisp and cool, a stark contrast to the suffocating heat of the party. Nathan took a deep breath, letting the breeze wash over him, easing some of the tension that had built up in his chest. Behind him, Julian stepped out, standing close but not speaking, simply tilting his head back to take in the glowing Los Angeles skyline. You do this often? Nathan asked, his voice light but laced with curiosity. Julian glanced at him. Do what? Go to parties you don't like and stand in the corner like an unfinished painting? Julian chuckled, the sound warm and effortless, so different from the chaotic energy inside. I'm not really the party type, he admitted, but sometimes, for friends, I try. Nathan nodded. I get that. Julian raised an eyebrow, a smirk playing on his lips. What about you? A tough basketball guy like you. I'd assume you'd be at the center of attention. Nathan let out a short laugh, but it wasn't entirely genuine. I'm good at pretending, he said, his eyes flickering toward the distant city lights. Good at letting people see what they want to see. Julian didn't respond right away. Instead, he stepped a little closer, the space between them shrinking to just a few inches. So what do I see? He asked, his voice soft but carrying weight. Nathan turned to meet his gaze, Julian's gray eyes looking at him like they saw straight through every layer of pretense. I'm still figuring that out. The tension between them thickened, electric yet unspoken. Nathan could feel his pulse quicken, not from adrenaline, not from a game-winning shot, but from something entirely different. I like talking to you, Julian murmured, his gaze never wavering. Nathan smiled. Yeah, me too. And just like that, the unspoken tension between them shifted into something undeniable. The moment stretched endlessly. Julian's eyes locked onto Nathan's, unwavering. Nathan's heart pounded, not from basketball, not from adrenaline, but from him, from Julian, from the way he looked at him like he already understood everything Nathan was too afraid to say out loud. Then Julian smiled, slow and knowing. You're not the kind of guy who lets people in easily, are you? Nathan inhaled deeply, steadying his voice. Not usually. He paused, tilting his head slightly. But you make it seem easy. Julian didn't answer right away. He just held Nathan's gaze, as if weighing something in his mind. Then, slowly, cautiously, he stepped closer, the distance between them now reduced to nothing but a breath. So, Julian murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. What are you going to do about that? Nathan knew he had two choices. He could turn away, shove his feelings down, keep playing the role he'd always played, the confident, Untouchable guy who never let anything or anyone get too close. Or, he could step toward Julian. He chose the second. Without thinking, without hesitating, Nathan reached out, his fingers brushing over Julian's wrist, pulling him just a little closer. Julian didn't pull away. Instead, he tilted his head, his sharp jawline catching the glow of the street lamp, his gray eyes glimmering in the low light. Nathan smirked slightly. I think you already know what I'm going to do. His voice dropped lower, one hand settling at Julian's waist, pulling him closer. But if you need me to say it. He leaned in, his lips hovering just inches from Julian's. I'm not letting you walk away without knowing for sure. Julian's breath hitched slightly, but instead of pulling back, he smiled, a teasing, almost challenging glint in his eyes. Then show me. Nathan didn't wait any longer. He closed the distance between them, pressing his lips to Julian's. Warm, soft, unstoppable. And in that instant, he knew this wasn't a mistake. Their kiss wasn't rushed, wasn't reckless. It was deliberate, exploratory, a silent question neither of them needed to put into words. But when Julian's fingers curled into Nathan's jacket, when his breath hitched slightly, Nathan knew he had his answer. They didn't need words anymore. Just the quiet rhythm of their breaths mingling, the unspoken heat filling the space between them. Julian was the first to pull away, his lips grazing Nathan's cheek as he murmured, voice slightly unsteady, "We can't stand here forever." Nathan chuckled, but before he could respond, a sudden burst of laughter and footsteps cut through the moment. The back door to the house swung open, and a couple stumbled outside, too wrapped up in their own world to notice Nathan and Julian standing just beyond the shadows. Immediately, Julian took a small step back, his expression shifting from open and vulnerable to something more guarded. Nathan noticed the change, and instinctively, he squeezed Julian's hand, reassuringly, but Julian only smiled faintly, slipping his hand from Nathan's in a way that was subtle but deliberate. "You like danger, don't you?" Julian whispered, a teasing edge in his voice. But there was caution behind it too. Nathan met his gaze, unwavering. "Not danger, just you." Julian exhaled, studying him, weighing something. Then, after a moment, he nodded, his gray eyes sparking with something determined. "Then let's get out of here." Nathan didn't ask if he was sure. He didn't need to. With a knowing smirk, he grabbed Julian's hand again, leading him away from the backyard, leaving behind the pounding music and muffled voices. The night wasn't over yet, and they both knew it. Nathan could still feel Julian's warmth against his palm, the slight tremor in his fingers, not from uncertainty, but from anticipation. Neither of them spoke as they walked down the quiet street, the city lights painting long shadows on the damp pavement. Julian kept his hands tucked in his jacket pockets, his gaze flickering toward Nathan every now and then, as if making sure this was real. Nathan didn't rush to fill the silence. He liked this, the slow, charged anticipation, the feeling that something significant was about to happen. "So, where are we going?" Julian finally broke the silence, his voice light with amusement. Nathan raised an eyebrow. "I thought you were the one who suggested we leave." Julian chuckled, the sound rich and smooth in the cool night air. "Fair point." Nathan glanced at him, a playful glint in his eyes. "Your place or mine?" Julian stopped walking, turning to face him fully. His teasing expression softened into something more serious. A breeze ruffled his hair, casting shifting shadows across his face. "My place," he said, his voice steady. Nathan felt his pulse spike, not with nerves, but with certainty. Julian wasn't just following an impulse. He knew exactly what he was doing, and he was choosing Nathan. Nathan didn't hesitate. "Lead the way." Julian smiled, turning to walk ahead, and Nathan followed, keeping pace beside him. No second guessing, no regrets, just one simple truth. Tonight wasn't about stolen glances or lingering conversations. There was no more space left between them. And as Julian's apartment door clicked shut behind them, Nathan knew, this wasn't just another night. This was the start of something bigger.